The effects of the pandemic are already devastating on the economy. We know this, but let's spare a thought for the people that will be hit hardest. A report from Bath University estimates that a million 16 to 24-year-olds will face significant barriers to work when the furlough scheme ends. A million 16 to 24-year-olds. And frankly, this isn't a problem that we should accept. I'm sure you'll agree. It's one that we simply must solve together if we're not to lose a whole generation to unemployment. Whatever's brought you into this gathering, thank you. I know that those challenges will resonate with you. We have a very special guest this morning, Gordon Brown, former Chancellor, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, currently hugely engaged in education around the world. And before we meet him and an absolutely brilliant panel to follow, I'd like to welcome to your screen the person who has brought us all here this morning. She is the Chief Executive of Young Enterprise. It's a great pleasure to welcome Sharon Davies. Sharon, good morning.
Good morning, Ollie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, Sharon. Let me get it on the table straight away. Young Enterprise is one of the leading charities, frankly, in the world when it comes to supporting young people. Sharon, remind us a bit about the work that Young Enterprise does.
Yeah, sure. We're a national enterprise and financial education charity founded in 1962 by Sir Walter Solomon. We work with educators, employers, parents and carers to support young people from 5 to 24 years old to learn the critical skills and mindset to learn to earn and manage their money and make that positive contribution to their community.
Sharon, tell us why we are here this morning. Why was this event important and what's the gathering really about?
That's a great question, that, Ollie, and maybe I can answer it by taking you back to early May and telling you about someone called Sam Slee. Now, in Sam's small village community in west of Bath, there were plans to have a big celebration for the 75th anniversary of VE Day. But with lockdown and social distancing guidelines, these plans were not only thwarted, the actual original event needed to be cancelled. But Sam knew how important that day was for so many people in the village, many of whom had been counting down the days, all for very, very different reasons. This was a massive event for the community. And Sam wondered, what if something else could be done to mark this important event rather than cancelling it, rather than people going to the celebration? What if the celebration could be brought to the people? And Sam came up with this amazing idea to personalise sustainable masks. And so older and more vulnerable people could still raise a glass from their very own doorstep and join in commemorating this really important event for that community. And on the day of the anniversary, Sam enabled over 40 people to celebrate safely and celebrate from their very own doorsteps. But he also did something else, Ollie. He also enabled hope. And hope is a powerful emotion in the wake of a national crisis. Sam is 10 years old. He goes to Marksbury School. He started his idea with just £5. And I know from being in contact with his mum, Nicola, she's incredibly proud. And that's because Sam saw a problem. He saw a solution. And Ollie, we're learning powerful lessons from young people like Sam every single day in this crisis. And at Young Enterprise, we're seeing firsthand, and I know my colleagues are as well, and they'll talk about that later in the panel, firsthand, young people being resourceful, very often with very limited resources, I have to say, adaptable and creative. And this enterprising mindset is a mindset that our communities like Sam's benefit from and that employers value highly. But perhaps more importantly than that, in these times, this mindset actively chooses hope. It chooses hope in the face of uncertainty. And that's something we could all do with right now. because we know that the impact of COVID is extremely challenging for young people. Youth unemployment is on course to triple to its highest level since the early 80s. We also know that the impact isn't even. The greatest impact is falling on those young people who were already facing the greatest barriers to social mobility prior to COVID. So in these incredibly challenging times, we need equally challenging, wide-ranging, thoughtful conversations. And we believe this needs to include, as a national imperative actually, to explore what role mindset has in helping not just young people, but all of us to navigate this crisis. So that's why we wanted to bring leaders from education, from charities, from employers, entrepreneurs, and our future leaders together to begin that conversation. And I guess the question that I'd like to leave everyone with today is, how do we encourage more SAMs in this world? And our proposition is that somewhere in the mix, that it starts with mindset.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. And congratulations to Sam at 10 years old. I must say, that's the most inspiring story I've heard this week. It's just brilliant. And one example. Really, really, really fantastic. Now, it is a great pleasure to introduce our special guest for this Young Enterprise event. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to introduce you to the former Chancellor and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Gordon Brown. Gordon, good morning.
Good morning. I hope everybody's well and everybody's safe. It is a delight to be with you. I was involved 15 years ago in helping Young Enterprise move forward with summer schools, and we had a report on enterprise and education. And I see how in the last year in particular, you've developed phenomenally. So keep going, and I'm here to do whatever I can to support you.
I wonder if I can bring you, Gordon, to our topic for today. And it's really about the changing world of work. And I just wonder if we zoom right out, if I could ask you firstly, what changes do you think we should be prepared to see in the world of work over the coming months and years?
Yeah, I think they're quite transformational. I think we were already in a process of change, and I think it's going to accelerate. Online, obviously, working from home. But just think of the opportunities before we deal with some of the problems we've got to address. Opportunities in the digital, in the IT area, massively expansion. Online health, online education, everything else. Social care, we know we've neglected it. We're going to have to train people in this one-to-one caring profession that needs to be developed to the full. And you know, the proposition of Young Enterprise, everybody has a talent. Everybody has potential. Everybody is unique, and everybody's got something special to offer. And it's our job to help people bridge the gap between what they are and what they haven't in themselves to become. And that's why Young Enterprise is so successful, because you don't just talk about academic, or you don't just talk about traditional craft skills. You talk about skills in a whole range of areas, including being self-employed, starting your own business, showing entrepreneurial mindset, as you've just said. And that, I think, is so important for the future.
Yeah. And I'm hearing within that mix, Gordon, access to experiences, perhaps retraining, reskilling. Just say a little bit about why that matters to you and some of your recommendations for what you'd like to see happening for and in support of the next generation.
So Sharon said 1 million young people this month are out of work doing nothing. Now that's a phenomenal figure when you think about it. That's 1 million young people right across the country can't look forward to the possibility of a job. The only letters they may get are rejection letters from employers saying we can't take you on, if the employer even replies. So we've got to do something bigger than the Kickstart scheme, which has been introduced by the government. We've got to promise work experience, we've got to promise proper training, we've got to promise help with job search, like help with writing your job applications, and we've got to give employers an incentive to take people on. And we've got to help people, even if you're 10, like the story we had, of showing your entrepreneurial skills and giving people a chance to develop this. So there is nothing more important than this. We cannot return to the 1980s, when I saw so many young people, their chances destroyed almost for a decade and more, because they were months, in some cases years, without a proper job. We've got to do something about it, but it's built on this idea of Young Enterprise. Everybody has a talent. We must help people develop that. That's the key.
Yeah, it is absolutely the key. I remember very vividly your support of enterprise education as Chancellor and Prime Minister. Just tell us why enterprise education was so important to you in that most powerful role.
When I was at school, no businessman, no businesswoman ever entered our school. And so teachers did not encourage business leaders to come into school at that time. And I tried to encourage schools to bring in business leaders, and that's been happening. But it makes a huge difference because we never knew firsthand what a business was about. We weren't being taught that at all. Nobody knew. So you've got to have enterprise education in the curriculum. It really matters so much.
Yeah, and it is about unlocking that talent, isn't it? I've got a question here, which has been sent in from Maddie Pete, and we'll see Maddie asking her question. She's from the Youth Zone in Wigan. If we could just see that question now. Thank you, Maddie, for sending it in. Let's have a look.
I've been doing enterprise since I was junior, selling milkshakes and Christmas crafts, and now enrolled onto the Young Enterprise programme at Wigan Youth Zone. What advice would you help young people do enterprise in the school curriculum?
So I think we've got to persuade the education authorities to take this more seriously. Undoubtedly, teachers are under real pressure. I mean, they particularly because the school curriculum has been interrupted. But I think, as I said before, bring the business leaders into the school, get them talking to the kids. And at the same time, school children, get them a chance to go into a company and see how a company works while you're still at school. Yeah. And it's this interaction. If all you're hearing about is the academic course, or a particular vocational course, then we're not showing people the range of opportunities that are available to them. And that's what you've got to do. Bring business into school, have interchanges between school and business, get the teachers into the business, get the business into the school. And I think that would make a huge difference. We just got to encourage more of that so that enterprise is very much part of the school, not just the curriculum, but just the way a school works, linked up to its local community and seeing all the businesses that are making a difference in that area and what can be done and what opportunities you have.
That seems like a good moment to put another question to you from the Chief Exec of the Social Mobility Foundation, Sarah Atkinson. This is very close to her heart. Sarah asks this question. Let's see if we can get that.
In the wake of the global financial crash of 2008, social mobility in the UK declined. How do we learn the lessons and prevent that from happening again this time, especially given that the pandemic is affecting not just the economy, but also education? Thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We looked at this in 2008-9 and we tried to do something. We were discussing the frustration that people had because social mobility was being held back and young people particularly weren't getting the opportunity to move forward. Think of this as opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. How can we extend the range of opportunities even in a time when businesses are not taking on people? So the public sector's got to play a role. Local authorities should be given the resources to help people do things. Environmental programs have really got to be introduced. Social housing, we've got to build that. So we need more opportunities for people to do things. And I think that'll make a difference. The other thing I would say is there's no substitute for one-to-one tutoring and mentoring. I mean, that's really got to be part of everything that we do.
Yeah, I'm struck by the opportunity that the United Kingdom has as a world leader in education, technology, connecting all around the world. And that question on social mobility, we had a number of similar questions, including from Jessica Carson, Sony Music UK, around the most effective intervention to help further social justice. So this is.
Well, I think we've got to increase the college and university places. It's ridiculous when there's a demand. A lot of people are not getting into college and university at the moment. So that's a big thing we've got to do. We've got to reward jobs that are seen as underpaid and under-recognized, like in the caring professions. I mean, a career in the caring professions, whether providing care as a business or whether as an individual in the care sector, is something that we should value far more. So social mobility is helped if we don't just regard these jobs as low-paid jobs or starter jobs. We regard these jobs as really professional jobs because we've seen in this crisis the risks that people take to work in the social care sector. We've seen how much we should value the NHS and all the jobs in that, not just from surgeons to nurses, but from nurses to all the auxiliaries, as we call them, because they're not auxiliaries. The people who are the porters, the people who are the caterers, the people who are the cleaners in the health service. We need to value people more, and we need to show that as a route to social mobility, and not something that captures you in a low-paid job and you can't escape it.
Yeah, no, totally. So this question is from Ed Kensington, the Chief of Staff and Head of Strategy at HSBC. It's around their work as a leading employer, saying, we bring in significant numbers of young people every year through a variety of routes. What can we do to encourage schools to focus more of their teaching around skills of the future that have vocational relevance? Great question.
Well, offer as a company your skills and your people to come into the schools. I mean, it's just what I said at the beginning. The second thing is we have to look around the world at the great courses. We used to think of education as the teacher on the stage lecturing the children or the young people in the classroom. Now you can have the best teachers in the world getting to your classroom by doing online lectures and so on and so forth. So get the best teacher in the world that can talk about a particular course and get them streamed into your classroom. That's the way forward. And we need to use the whole range of online services to make education in its best sense available to people without failing to recognize that we need one-to-one mentoring and tutoring as Young Enterprise wants to see.
Yeah. So there's a even pithier question here from Lorraine Holden, the VP Humanitarian and Development at Mastercard, and it is again about our schools, particularly in the UK. Does the current UK schools curriculum prepare our young people adequately for the jobs of the future? And if not, what is missing? You've talked about how we can get those skills flowing in, but what are those skills, and what is missing?
Well, not enough, obviously, because look, I'm less computer literate than my teenage sons, and teachers will, in many respects, be less computer literate than the pupils. So we've got to expand that kind of education. The ability to use artificial intelligence, the ability to use all the digital innovations that have been made. And to be honest, I think we've been quite slow to introduce that into our schools. And I think that's got to be done. It's a big investment, but it's worth it. And you can link up with some of these companies, including the Mastercard Foundation, which does a lot of good work.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. There is a question about parents and children. Actually, Lorraine Allman, I hope you don't mind. It's more personal. As a parent, how are you encouraging your own children's enterprising mindset?
That's difficult. You have to ask my kids about that, about whether they think. I mean, one of my sons is doing the Duke of Edinburgh's award because he thinks that will develop his skills in doing voluntary work and so on. Another is very interested in IT and digital. And you've got to find, it's not for me to say to them what their talent is. It's for them to say to me, look, this is what I'm interested in. And you've got to find what interests young people and then say, let's build on that. Think of what you could do with this. Think of what you could do on this course, or think of the opportunities that Young Enterprise are offering you as well. So I think it's very much listening to your teenagers particularly, and them telling you what they think they want to develop as a skill and a talent.
A very brief question. Mark Goddard, Managing Director of UBS. If you were still Prime Minister, now we're getting into it, how would you approach creating jobs for graduates coming out of university now into, of course, very difficult and uncertain times? Be as practical as you like on that.
Well, I mean, I finished at university and there was a recession on at that time, a long time ago, and I didn't have work for several months. And there's going to be a massive amount of graduate unemployment. So I would persuade companies to take people on as graduates. If necessary, I would stay on and get another qualification. I think you've got to realize that when you finish your university education, your education is not finished. And there may be skills that you can acquire that can help you get jobs later. But as companies, I think companies should come together with the government, and we should have a plan that says, look, we have got several 100,000 unemployed graduates. Let's see what we can do as companies and government together and find a funding scheme that can get people into work. I think it's really important that we have a collective effort to make that happen.
Yeah, and what would be your rallying call to a business tuned in?
That young people have great talent. And if we waste a generation of talent, we will pay a heavy price in the future. So even if it may seem costly in the short term, even if it may seem that you cannot take on additional responsibilities as an employer, you should consider doing it.
I want to come back to our theme of the morning, particularly around mindset. Hannah asks a question, Hannah Cook, what role does mindset play in enabling young people to succeed? We've talked a lot about connections, to opportunities, experiences. How about mindset?
Well, I think it comes back to what was said at the beginning, hope, because people's mindset has got to be something can change, something can be better. We can actually make things improve. And if you start from the fact you have got a talent, you have got potential, you've got a special quality that you can add to benefit our society, then we will help you develop that talent. And the mindset is, instead of being desolate and instead of losing hope, that you have the hope that something will change. And it's not optimism, which is something might change, and it's not wishful thinking something could change. It's hope that something will change because we're determined it changes. You know, there's a French saying that you can survive for 40 days without food, 8 days without water, 8 minutes without air, but you can't survive for a second without hope. And we have got to persuade people that even in the most difficult and desolate of times, when people feel that they've lost out, and for many people, this will feel a year that's been taken out of their lives because of the virus, there is still hope. And we can make what seems impossible at the moment possible by working together to achieve it.
So say all of us on this call and far, far beyond. Former Prime Minister, Chancellor, Global Envoy on Global Education for the United Nations, Gordon Brown, thank you so much for joining us.
My best wishes to you in everything you do.
If you're just tuning in, our hosts, of course, this morning are Young Enterprise. And I'm not going to waste any more time in introducing our panel. I think you're going to really enjoy meeting them. Our big theme is around enterprising mindset. So let's see them, hopefully, up on screen promptly. And I'll tell you exactly who they are. Firstly, Mohsin Ismail. Mohsin, good morning. Top right, I would say, is the principal of Newham Collegiate Form, Newham Collegiate Sixth Form. And in the first year at the college, his pupils have really achieved more than anyone thought was possible. So thank you, Mohsin, for joining us this morning. Ndidi Okezi. Good morning, Ndidi. Always great to see Ndidi. Ndidi is the chief exec of UK Youth. That is a national charity, particularly equipping young people with the skills and the life skills they need to take their full part in society. Indeed, I think of UK Youth almost as a network. Is that a fair way to summarize it?
Absolutely, yeah. Network representing the youth sector and all the amazing youth organisations right across the UK.
Yeah, and how many members have you got? Where are you? Are you across the UK?
Yeah, right across the UK. So we work with nation partners in all of our nation partners, and there's around 7,000 youth organisations now that we connect to.
No, all strength to you. Taylor Evans. Good morning, Taylor. Yeah, top middle, as they say. Taylor might still be at school, but actually she is the former and maybe future managing director of EnviroTent. And if you don't know about EnviroTent, they were the winner of the Young Enterprise Company Programme 2020. So frankly, even in the midst of A-levels, she also finds time for some volunteer work with the National Young Enterprise Alumni Forum. Good morning, Taylor. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really, really well. Just remind us in a nutshell, Taylor, EnviroTent, this is a physical product, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's a cardboard tent and we designed it to help reduce plastic waste from festivals.
Oh, well, that's a bit of bad luck, isn't it, with festivals in 2020? Were you able to get any progress?
Yeah, so we designed the product, and with Glastonbury doing the at-home festival, we decided that was the kind of route we'd take and encourage people to use the tent at home.
Yeah, and there is a sort of, I'll ask you about this later, but technically you sort of wind down the company, but could there be a reformation, bring the band back together?
Yeah, there is a possibility of that because all the skills we learned as well, we've got the kind of mindset to do that. Brilliant,
good. Lots of questions for you this morning, Taylor, I'm sure from others as well. James Milligan, let's get this right. Bottom left on your screens, I hope you're seeing the same screen. I am the Global Head of Technology Business at Hays, absolutely formidable global company. He's also the chair of the board of the charity Teen Turn, which aims to provide teenage girls in particular with hands-on STEM experience. Just remind us, James, you're helping companies presumably all around the world access tech talent, really?
That's correct. Yeah. And despite the challenges at the moment, right, demand still outstrips supply in that technology market. So there's plenty to be optimistic about and to have hope about, as Gordon referenced earlier.
No, good. Well, thank you, James, for joining us on the call. Sam White, a fellow entrepreneur. Very good to see you, Sam.
Hey,
the Chief
Ollie.
Executive of Freedom Services Group, and Stella Insurance, the Australian insurance company for women drivers. Sam, you've started your first business at 24, and it doesn't seem like you've been touching the brake very much. We have Stephen Welton, the executive chair and the founding CEO of BGF, the Business Growth Fund. It has deployed over £2.2 billion into growth companies, a team of 170, 16 offices. The most active growth capital investor in the UK, I think, Stephen.
We are. And good morning, Ollie. I mean, I think to the point about hope, we are going through a significant structural change in the economy. That's creating a lot of uncertainty, and it's going to lead in the short term to increasing unemployment. But it is also going to create industries of the future, and there are going to be huge opportunities there. We've already learned about technology, but I think, as Gordon Brown was saying, it goes across every sector. It goes to the social sector, to healthcare. And what we have to do is to find a way to tap into a generation that I think has got an enormous amount to give. But we need to give them the roadmaps and the confidence as to how they're going to get there, because this is a very, very uncharted and unclear environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this conversation, I know we're going to get quite practical. I'm going to start with quite a personal question. What do you think was the biggest driver of your success? And Ndidi, I'm going to ask you that first, and then I'll go to Mohsin. And let's just get a glimpse of that, because clearly you're all doing extraordinary things. But I'd like a personal reflection, Ndidi.
I honestly think for me, from a very young age, it was so fascinating listening to the conversation just now, but I think from a very young age, I wanted to make a difference. I'm not quite sure where that came from. I felt that and I felt not only that I wanted to make a difference, but that I could make a difference. And so I think I've just always been driven by that. And I think as I grew up, the more I realized how unequal things were, and the things that I kind of had just assumed were life, you then discover that other people have access to things that you never even imagined. And then just the reality of seeing that play out over and over again. I've always had this core, it doesn't have to be this way. Why is it this way? And this belief that it's people that determine the status quo and determine how things work. And so if it's people that determined a state that is so unequal and unfair in so many ways, then it's equally people that can change that.
Thank you, Ndidi. Well, let's do a quick round of all of our guests just on that. And by the way, when I say what was the biggest driver of your success, it could be an internal quality, don't be modest, but it could be something or someone along the way. We'll do this very briefly. Mohsin, what would you say?
Morning, Ollie. Morning, everyone. Wonderful to be here with you all. I think for me, it's the sense of restlessness. I never thought I was going to become a teacher. I always wanted to become a lawyer. Having watched Ron Paul of the Bailey and LA Law in the good old days, inspired me to do that. But then I, like indeed, realized that there is this moral imperative of helping people from disadvantaged backgrounds, because I didn't see that represented in the places that I luckily and fortunately ended up in. And for me, again, it was this belief that I could really try to change it and do something about it. So that's a quick, short, snappy reason for, I think, the restlessness and belief, I would say.
I would say probably sort of natural competitiveness that I had as an individual. But I'd say the biggest moment for me, probably the biggest driver in my career, was when that crash happened in 2009 and the business really contracted and we had to look at things differently. And we had to show an awful lot of resilience and look at the opportunities that the rebuild presented. And for me, that if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have the job that I have today. I would have taken a different path. So I don't know how to reference that, but it's like, it's not fate, but it is certainly, if everything comes easily, you don't learn, you don't develop, and you don't fulfill all your opportunity or fulfill all your potential. I think it is challenging, but it's also very exciting at the moment for what the world's going to look like and how things are going to develop over the next number of years. Let's not be flippant about it, because it's very, very tough at the moment for lots and lots of people. But I think, the whole world is going to change, and it's going to be different to how it otherwise might have been, and it's going to get to places more quickly than it otherwise would have had this not happened.
Thank you, James. Now we'll do very, very quickly. Stephen, then Sam.
Ollie, I think actually I probably was entrepreneurial as a youngster. I would love to have been smart enough to invent something or create something that was truly groundbreaking. It was going to change the planet, but I wasn't able to do that. But I recognized I was able probably to sell something and to get behind an idea. And I think within business, you need teams of people. You need somebody who can sell and promote, somebody who can make things, somebody who can bring teams together. And I just had a curiosity more than anything else as a young person about doing things differently. And I think that led me in lots of different directions. I wouldn't have an idea that I would be doing what I'm doing today, but probably there's a thread. I would be doing something to do with enterprise and business because I enjoyed it and I was curious. So I think to Gordon Brown's earlier comment, whatever you do, follow your passion, because if you're passionate about something, you're likely to be better at it.
I think challenge is a really key point for me. I mean, I had quite a difficult childhood and I was dyslexic. So school, from a starting viewpoint, was very challenging. And I think for me, kind of overcoming that was the sort of first lesson that sometimes things that are really hard give you the most value. And so hope is absolutely a theme for me. Optimism is as well. I know it's a bit of a dirty word at the moment, but I am optimistic, but without expectation, which sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. But for me, particularly with the dyslexia as a child, there was many times that I failed, that I couldn't grasp things as quickly as other people might have been able to. And actually knowing that that's okay and getting yourself back off the tarmac and having another go at it, I think has been a really key driver for me. Sometimes these things are a secret superpower. So I happen to think dyslexia is a secret superpower. I meet loads of entrepreneurs that are dyslexic, and it's because we find another way of getting to the solution. And often it's a different route than the path that other people would take. So, that mindset point around looking at how you perceive the problem to be as opposed to the actual problem, I think is really key for parents. You don't want to, you don't want to show disappointment, because I think disappointment and, expectation together can be very dangerous things without that sort of slightly different take on the world, that maybe this thing that you think is ultimately going to hold them back in life might be the thing that pushes them forward.
I think for me, a lot of my success comes from people putting their faith in me. So having a business advisor and companies put a lot of resources and time into it, it's kind of like you can't fail it then, you have to keep going even when it gets tough. So that I think really drove me, is seeing people believe in me. It made me believe in myself and keep going.
And presumably in some cases, these were people you hadn't met before engaging with Young Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. So companies and professionals within that, coming out and giving us their skill set, that really helped.
Yeah. I wonder if we can just get practical for a minute, rather than coming to you each in turn. If you give me one of those waves, then we'll jump around a bit more, because there's a lot that we want to get through. It's quite a practical question. How do we foster the mindset that leads to success? Who will get the ball rolling? I know you've all got thoughts on that. Sam, go on then, Stephen, and then Sam. I can see you've got those. Now let's keep it pithy and practical. Let's go.
Encouraging people. There is no such thing as a stupid question. So ask lots of questions and ask people for advice. The best creations are often the ones that come through serendipity. One idea sparks off another idea.
I love the author of The Chimp Paradox. He makes a really good point that you should focus on doing your best and not the outcome. I think it's really important to foster an environment of no fear or favor with children and to say and young adults, and to say, look, do your absolute best, but if it doesn't work out, it's okay. You've got to nurture that environment, not to allow them to get sunk with the inevitable failures that will happen along the way.
I think the more we can get professionals, people's on platforms, sharing their mistakes. I think we talk about normalizing mistakes, but we're asking it to start from young people. Let them see others celebrating and talking about their mistakes and their errors so that we can normalize effort. And the effort doesn't always mean a great outcome, but actually it's in the pursuit of something bigger.
I think from an educational perspective, and the context that I work in, enterprising mindset has to be rooted in adults having extremely high expectations of them and putting young people in situations where it's okay to fail, but allowing them to have the tenacity to be able to have the skill set and the mindset to be able to overcome that. And I love the context of sports. When you hear sports people, men and women, and the way they talk about handling pressure, it's completely different to the layperson. You talk about pressure, they say, I'm excited about that prospect, rather than they fear it. And I think that kind of mentality has to be engendered within the educational setting as well.
So just to build on that previous point, I think there has to be access to opportunity to work with business or with professions. So one of the things we do with Teen Turn is we give access to people that otherwise wouldn't get access to that work in that professional environment and dealing with real challenges to bring that to life, to show the reality of it. And I think that's really important. There's a role for everybody to play in this. The best way of learning is sort of by doing and having to deal with that situation.
We're always striving to be the very best, and it's competitive, and you want to get to the top of your class or be particularly good at something. There is a danger, of course, that you lose a lot of people along the way because only one person is going to come top of a class. So if I just translate that into our context of business, and I think we are all and should always be learning for the whole of our lives. So it's not an enterprising mindset starts with a child, but hopefully continues as an adult. One of the most powerful things we do as a business, and this is maybe with a group of 100 investors, is to get somebody to stand up in front of their colleagues and explain how they made a mistake. And in our business, there are no right or wrong answers. We're making investment judgments all the time, and they are judgments and they're not guaranteed to succeed. But the confidence to stand up in front of your peers and say, I did something, this is what I thought was going to happen, and it didn't happen. And the reaction is not everybody else in the room thinking, you're an idiot, why did you do that? It's everybody else in the room thinking, I could have done that, and how do we learn from that? And I think with children in particular, that willingness to share that you don't necessarily know the answer, that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, you just need to be in the room and engaging, is incredibly powerful. So you want to strip away this idea that there is one type of success. I mean, success ultimately comes from teams, and teams are made up of different people, and you've got to be prepared to share in a safe environment what you're good at, what you're not good at, learning from experiences. And that's how, I mean, practice makes perfect, is because we learn from our mistakes, and we should embrace that rather than being intimidated by it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Stephen. Well, Taylor, you've been listening to our theories on this. Have we missed something? Does anything particularly resonate here? We want to go away from this event geared up to support enterprising mindsets all across the UK. What do you think?
So opportunities like Young Enterprise, I think that's really good for young people just to discover what they are capable of. Because I think that really is it, like the journey that they're finding in themselves and kind of developing skills that they have.
Can I just ask you quite specifically, Taylor, how, when it really boils down to it, how Young Enterprise impacted your approach to building not just the company, but your whole future? If you just had to really break it down and distill it, what would it be?
Yeah, so Young Enterprise has completely changed my future. I think my attitude towards life has changed. It's really boosted my confidence, and kind of like the mistakes and challenges I faced has really made me less hesitant in future to kind of take on bigger challenges, and kind of when I see an opportunity or something that I want to do, not shy away from it as much or be as hesitant, because I know that I've faced challenges before and that I can overcome them. And I think kind of people I've met along the way as well, kind of like companies and other entrepreneurs, that's really inspired me and opened up more opportunities that I can take on in the future.
What changes do we need to make to the education system to produce a workforce that can cope but thrive in this strange new world?
Again, Ollie, I think in terms of my own context and the school that and the area that I work in, less privileged, Newham, second most deprived borough in London. I think if you want to see great education outcomes, the easiest thing or the hardest thing is to end poverty, and you'll see those gap close quite quickly. But failing that, I think the other part is that I think there needs to be high expectations in schools. And you hear a lot about that, but especially in areas of disadvantage, I think that's paid lip service. I also think you need to have recruitment strategies or approaches that get the best people, the best leaders to be working in disadvantaged areas. And I think that's another area. And I think also you need to end the bigotry of low expectations. And I think that's prevalent in lots of areas which serve communities like mine.
Low expectations from whom?
Well, I think it can be adults themselves and teachers themselves. I think sometimes if you're working in that environment, your comparison or your comparator is only the people around you. And I think it's one of the things we're trying to do is to say, well, why can't you be similar or achieve similar grades to an Etonian or any of those private grammar school students who are born with special privileges or have special privileges in their life, and our young people don't for no fault of their own. And I think you've seen that. As soon as you have adults who have high expectations, we've now had, I think, 7 or 8 students who've got full scholarships to Ivy League universities, to MIT, Harvard, and Princeton. And that's never happened in Newham. So it can't be the case that there's never been talent in Newham and we turn up and all of a sudden kids are going to Harvard, Princeton. The talent's always been there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Muhsin. And even again, reflecting on what we heard this morning from Gordon Brown, I think so often these conversations just head straight to schools. What should schools be doing? What should schools be doing? And as somebody who spent over a decade teaching in schools and considering all of the things happening now, it is just the most unrealistic thing to imagine that within the hours that young people go to school, we can suddenly do all of these separate things, like all these bolt-on things. The reality is that young people do not spend the majority of their time in school. Gordon Brown made a really powerful statement about the fact that your learning doesn't stop after university, but your learning doesn't stop at the end of the school day either. And so we need to start understanding that there are youth organizations, there are community programs, there are local faith groups that are doing amazing things with young people. And we need to start integrating the conversation of the work that's happening there into what's happening in schools. Because I can categorically tell you there are young people that show up very differently in out of school settings than they do in school. So what is going on outside of school that allows them to be more themselves, be more enterprising, be more whatever the case might be, and vice versa, actually. And so I think there is something about joining up all of the local youth provision that takes place outside of school with what is going on in school, so that we can really start working with young people as whole young people.
What defines the best entrepreneurs?
Well, that's a great question, and I can't answer that with hindsight in terms of the ones who've been really successful. I think there is an unbelievable determination in entrepreneurs, because certainly if you're starting up a business from scratch, so Taylor is doing that. I mean, many people say, well, don't do it because it's going to fail. And statistically, that's right, it will fail, but it doesn't fail for everybody. And the great thing about entrepreneurs is they will always assume you're talking about somebody else. Well, that may be true, but it's not me. Entrepreneurs don't think things are crazy. They think there are opportunities. And we want to encourage that sense of being a little bit different. And I think indeed he's absolutely right. I mean, there isn't one way to package this up. When we look at people, you know when you've got somebody who has potential, and that's really what this is all about, the potential of an individual to then get people behind them to make an idea into a success.
What mindsets are the employers that you're speaking to looking for? Help us to understand the sorts of words they use, the things they're hunting for.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as Gordon referenced earlier, the world of work is constantly evolving and changing, and is doing so at an unprecedented rate. And what they're really looking for are people with agility. They can solve problems, they're creative, right? That they don't have a fixed set of skills, that they're constantly prepared to invest in themselves and evolve. And that's really, what organizations are coming and saying to us is when they're hiring, they're not hiring for a fixed set of skills, but they're hiring for somebody who can evolve and solve the problems of the future that don't even exist at the moment.
What do you think has been your superpower? But I guess more importantly, how do we pass that on to the next generation?
Yeah, I mean, definitely everything everyone's saying resonates for me. Resilience and tenacity have got to be the two things that you absolutely need as an entrepreneur, because things will not go to plan. I don't care how well planned you are. It's, things continually will kind of come up and bite you. So my superpower has absolutely been resilience. But, I come back to, in this point on expectation, for me, it's really important to keep throwing yourself at the wall, regardless of the outcome. And by that, I don't mean continually doing the same thing that isn't getting results. I mean that continual, that didn't work, let's try something else. Okay, that one didn't work, let's try something else, without allowing that disappointment to seep in, because that's the thing that really drags you down. On a day-to-day basis, I look for the little wins. I look for the things that bring me joy and the things that make me feel good about whatever journey I'm on. And I think it's really important to install that in young people.
Yeah, and keeping that candle burning, not losing hope. To Gordon's earlier point. Right, we've got questions flying in. Here's a good one from Catherine Marchant. Does the panel think it's wrong for making money to be a driver for someone who wants to be successful? And be as provocative as you like. What do you think about that? Mohsin, you've made some pretty big changes. What do you think?
No, it's not. Money should be or can be a motivation for people if they want to set up a business. And I think, again, going back to education, sometimes if a student says they want to get an education so they can earn money working for a big company, so they can lift their families by the bootstraps and improve their lot, we tend to say to them, well, you're tainting education, because education should be the love of learning for learning's sake. Well, that's great. If you've got a privileged background and you've got lots of families that can support you. If you haven't, education is a vehicle for you to be able to change that. So I have no problems if money is your motivation in any context.
I mean, money is the currency with which our society judges itself. It is the way that it is. Do I think that we should be judging ourselves on some other measures? Absolutely. But I think anything that drives a person to experience more in life and, hopefully do some good and, bring other people along on that journey is not a negative thing. I think money for the sake of money can be very corrosive, but, it is a main driver in our society.
Marisol Milsom asks, is there a risk that in looking for resilience in young people, that could be an excuse in employers not to tackle their management and cultural issues? That's quite interesting, isn't it? Indeed. What do you make of that question?
Fantastic question. I don't think it has to be either or. I think it's both. I think the reality is you do need resilience. You just need resilience. But I do strongly believe that we need to stop just expecting young people to evolve and iterate and fit into the cultures they're walking into. Young people have inherent value now as they are now. And actually one of the best things an organization can do is to learn from their incoming cohort of young people and think about what might need to change from their organization's perspective. So it's not just one way.
I just wonder, we've got leaders from all sorts of organizations and indeed many students tuning in. Is there a final, we won't have time for a final message for anybody, but I just wonder if you had a message for someone who might be thinking today, you know what, the future is looking pretty challenging for me right now, and I don't know where those next opportunities are going to come from. What would be your message to them this morning? Does anyone have something they just put out there? Because it's been a very upbeat morning, but actually when the screen goes off, for some people it's very challenging.
I'm happy to jump in. I wasn't actually expecting when Gordon Brown was talking about hope, I honestly fundamentally believe in every single thing that he said. Yes, you are hearing lots and lots of negativity, but there is something about the hope to believe that things not only can, but they will change. And I just encourage all of us to just watch our words and start injecting a bit more of that hope into the conversations that we have, because young people are listening. So that's the message that I would say. Do not just listen to the negativity. things can and they will and they must change.
I think acquire as many skills as you can. I mean, there are a huge range of online courses that are available, different elements of business. So hope is fundamental. We want that, but you also need skills. So if you have downtime, there aren't immediate opportunities. Use that time to actually go out and search useful information and reach out to people. And I think Young Enterprise does a great job of actually embracing young people and bringing others together. Be proactive. And I think young people, and Taylor's a great example of that, have the confidence to be able to go and look for things. So we should respond positively to that.
And Taylor, there will be people on the call, perhaps with people close to them, relatives, who are frankly struggling a bit at school at the moment. The future might seem a bit foggy. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I do think it's really difficult at the moment with school and all the uncertainty. But I just think, again, building off what Gordon said and what Ndidi mentioned, just remaining hopeful and just remembering that things will change and that it won't stay the same forever. And I think being young, it can be quite easy to just pass off opportunities because they can be quite daunting and scary. But I think just grabbing hold of anything that comes your way and just taking part in things.
Well, all strength to you in your amazing adventures to come. Thank you so much, one and all, to the whole panel, to Sam, to James, to Mohsin, to Ndidi, to Stephen, and of course to Taylor as well. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And it's been a great honour to help us through this discussion. Thank you.